Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews, and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're keeping safe. I've been fortunate enough to know Chadd VanZanten for quite a few years now, after discovering his blog and asking him to write for the online magazine I ran at the time, Eat, Sleep, Fish. On launching Fly Culture, I knew I had to have him in the first edition. He has also continued to write for us, appearing in the very latest winter edition with his piece called The Audition. As with all of his writing, it is beautifully observed, funny, self-depreciating, and strikes a chord with any fly angler. He describes himself as a writer and angler who works as an editor. He is based in Utah and has co-written a book of essays called On Fly Fishing the Northern Rockies, which I can't recommend highly enough. I believe there is another book coming, which I plan to learn a little bit about today, and learn about his fishing. And we were talking just off mic as well about the importance of friendships in fishing as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So with great pleasure, I'm pleased and really excited to introduce Chadd VanZanten to the Fly Culture Podcast. Chadd, thanks so much. I know it's early there in the morning, so thanks for dropping by. How are you doing?
Good. Really good over here. Just trying to get through the plague and get back to some kind of status of normalcy.
Cool. And are you able to get out fishing?
Yeah. If you want to go fishing by yourself, it's not really a problem. And maybe if you want to go with one person who you trust hasn't been licking doorknobs or whatever, you can get out there and stay 6 feet apart or whatever. But yeah, it hasn't put a huge dent in just the day-to-day fishing, but canceled a couple trips that were lined up and maybe has depressed the fishing a bit. But luckily you can get out there, and it's one thing that kind of helps, get through the crazy, weird times. We've got COVID, but we also have this other virus called Donald Trump that we're just now kind of coming out of it. It's makes you feel really terrible and makes your head hurt, but that we may be through that now, but dealing with both of those was kind of a challenge.
And it looked like the Trump virus wasn't going to go away at one stage. You must be pleased you're getting over that now.
Yeah, it was touch and go.
So you talked about being able to go fishing and being where you are in Utah. I guess snow plays a part in life, everyday life there. And I've sort of got this romanticized vision of winter fishing with all of the banks of the river covered in snow. It's cold and my beanie's pulled over my ears and I'm making sure I keep nice and warm. And I'm sitting there waiting for that midge hatch that probably only happens for 20 minutes, half an hour, if that. Is that sort of how it is? Am I sort of along the right sort of lines?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. I mean, one thing that's interesting that I think not everybody fishes through the winter here even. And when I take somebody or will go with somebody who hasn't been winter fishing very much, one thing that is kind of surprising is that the water is warmer than the air. So you kind of want to get in the water, to kind of get out of so you're not so exposed. And then if you're down in the river bank, the wind might not be as as much of a factor. But yeah, that's you don't have to really wait for the midge hatches. You can go ahead and nymph. We do kind of Euro nymphing and maybe some hybridized methods of Euro nymphing, just basically trying to get heavy nymphs way down to the cobble where the fish are. And fish have to eat all year long, and so winter is when we fish, and we catch a lot of whitefish in the winter as a matter of course. But there's fishing to be done pretty much you can find somewhere to fish around here every day of the year and all through winter if you want to. Not everybody likes that. I used to do it a lot more than I do now. I think I get colder easier now.
It was funny, we were talking off mic and I said, one of the things I've missed this has probably been the longest spell I've been without fishing, and I'm fine with it at the moment. And the grayling days that we have are those sort of long breakfasts in the company of good friends, drinking coffee, and then somebody will eventually say, "Should we go?" And is it for you that you sort of time those? Is it that your fish dawn till dusk, or will it be that you're looking for that lunchtime to maximize your fishing time and being comfortable, I guess, as well?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question because I've always been fascinated, even from before I started seeing eat, sleep, fish and fly culture. I've always kind of been fascinated with the similarities, but also the differences in the way that you guys fish and that we guys fit over here. We fish, and there's a lot of similarities. And I mean, we're kind of. I see you have a Patagucci hat there, and I'm sure we use a lot of the same gear and stuff. But I've always pictured, you guys, having this kind of. It's kind of a social occasion. You sit down and there's a social aspect to it that needs to be accomplished. And then there's almost kind of a genteel aspect to it as you go out to the places where you're going, because these places are, very ancient, and, they've been fished for, a millennia or whatever. And you're going out there, and I've heard that rocks and pools have names that everybody knows, that everybody observes. And over here, I think it's a little bit more like there's no long breakfast. We say, well, let's meet at 8, and we end up meeting at 9:35, and we stop at the gas station and get these greasy, corn dog or a breakfast burrito or something. And then we sit in the car or in the truck and try to just get as warm as we can, and then rush out and get in the water. And it's a little more scruffy maybe than having a nice breakfast for a while, and then kind of trotting out to the stream. And it's a little more rough, I think, rough around the edges.
That sounds perfect.
And yet, basically the same thing. We want to go get some fish.
Yeah, it's interesting. Genteel and me are two words that don't go together, but I like it. I'm really pleased about that. I think part of it, and I don't know if it's as I get older, and I think trout season's slightly different because we obviously don't have trout all season. So we're fishing for grayling, and particularly where I live, there aren't so many grayling. So you haven't got many to go at. I think that's got something to do with it. Trout is different, and it would be exactly the same. I would pull over if I was fishing somewhere, grab something quickly and have it on my lap and eat it as I'm driving along, if you're allowed to do that. I don't know if that's against the law or not. But if not, I sit down and eat it properly, obviously. But with trout, it will be very, very similar. And I wonder with age, as I get a little bit older, and I remember my friend Ray and I, that we've been around the world fishing together, and I recall times where we'd be running to the river, putting up our waders, and we were fishing somewhere. We'd done a little mini road trip, and we'd sort of gone through Hampshire into Dorset, and we're heading to Devon. And it got to 3:00, and I said, dude, we've got to really start thinking about eating on these trips now. And we were just flying on vapors the whole time. And I wonder, do you think it is as you get a little bit older that you do start to think about the pace of the fishing a little bit more differently?
Yeah, for sure. Early in my fishing time, you said dawn to dusk a little bit ago, and that's how it would be. Just fish like every minute that you can, and fish into the darkness and kind of feel your way out. Whereas today, we're the friends that I fish with and myself, we're not as quite as desperate anymore. And that a lot of that is kind of knowing what you're doing. I might need 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I might need 3 hours to figure it out and finally start getting into fish. And now, there are places that you kind of have mapped out, plotted out, and you kind of know what's going to happen. So the desperation has gone down, but still, there are times when, yeah, you just want to fish every second, fish every moment of light, and just stay out there for as long as you can.
Yeah, I've noticed it since I've stopped guiding that I'm a little bit more selfish is the wrong word, but I want to fish and enjoy my fishing. And even when I was fishing with friends, I'd almost be the guide, not in the sense of giving tips or information, but just wanting to give them the shot at the pool or whatever it was. Now, I really have enjoyed going fishing on my own and enjoying that aspect of it. So it's been really cool to look at it from flip it the other way around, which has been really, really great. But for our listeners, your home water, if you have one, you say you can fish everywhere, every day of the year. If you had a home water, you don't need to name names or anything, but how would you describe it to somebody who's listening who may not go to Utah and fish and may not go to the US? How would you describe your stream to somebody?
Well, I used to kind of consider my home waters to be one or two rivers that I fished over and over again. But as I've gotten more experience, my home waters really is this watershed that I happen to live in the center of. This Bear River. The Bear River is a major American river. It doesn't drain to the ocean, but it's the biggest river in the United States, in the continental United States, that doesn't drain to an ocean. And it's just, it's 350 miles long, and it drains about 3,300 square miles. But there's myriad tributaries and reservoirs to fish. And so from where I sit right now, 30 minutes one way will take me to a couple of rivers. 30 minutes the other way will take me to several more rivers. And if I want to drive an hour or more, I can. There are a lot more. So there's not really one river, but most of them are freestone rivers. They would probably be considered smaller rivers. We're talking about maybe 300 CFS, average flow or less. Some of them are even smaller. And it's, fishing in the woods, going into the woods, and then taking a mile or a mile and a half of river and just walking up that, doing the mile and a half that you didn't do last time, and then doing the next mile and a half on subsequent trips. Really pretty. Lots of forested areas, lots of woods, and mostly fishing for trout. And hopefully getting into some native trout. It's a lot of the rivers are, kind of have the same characteristics, but each one has something that it offers, big pools or really, really high channels, high up in the mountains. Each one of them has its kind of own amenity or its own feature that you're going for. But if you're fishing in this watershed, you've got, 20 or 25 really good rivers that you can choose from, maybe 10 others that are a little more obscure or harder to get to and not well known, and then 20 or so reservoirs that you can pick from. And you can really say, okay, I want the Lower Logan experience where it's quick to get to. I know I'm going to catch some fish. It may not be as pretty as higher up, but it's still, really good looking. Or no, I want to go to the Cub. I want to go high up into the Cub and climb around on rocks and be really high up. You can kind of fashion your own trip depending on the year and the time and what you want. Right. And some places are good for fishing alone. Some are better for groups. Yeah, there's a lot of variety.
That sounds a really nice mix of water. Do you have a favorite? Is it pocket water? Pools? Is there anything that you prefer and you go, or it's all good? There
are certain rivers that you tend to go back to. There's a stream called the Cub River that is a tributary to the Bear River, Cub, Bear. And it's the way that it comes out of its headwaters and the way it's situated, it's it's a little more difficult to get to, so you're not going to see as many people. You kind of have to trudge over land for 15 or 20 minutes and kind of go down into these ravines to get to it. It's not near a road. There's a lot of rivers in the West, they have a road that runs next to them. And this one doesn't. And so if you're willing to kind of claw your way through this brush and scramble down rocky banks and stuff, you can get to the Cut River and not see other people, for that day, or maybe see another one or two people on the way. And so that's kind of, that would be my preferred situation. But when there's more than one river close to you, you feel like you have to kind of touch base every now and then with each one of them. And so you can't keep going to the same place every single day. I got to go check out conditions over here. Or I've heard that, spring runoff changed this channel. I got to go check that out. And, so you have to program that variety in. But yeah, definitely a small, high, secluded stream would be my preference.
I think that would be mine too. It was interesting you mentioned a couple of things, the names of the rivers, which if anyone's read any of Chadd's writing, they do feature around the bear and the cub, which is, like I say, they sound absolutely fascinating rivers. You mentioned CFS, which is water power, I guess, isn't it? Because we don't really follow.
Oh, yeah, cubic feet per second. The amount of water moving through per second. And, a lot of these rivers can go from, like the Logan River, one of the biggest tributaries to the Bear River, can go from 120 CFS base flow in the winter, just down to a trickle, up to 1200, roaring sort of spring runoff, dangerous situation. And the hydrograph goes up and down every year in a more or less predictable way. But, some years when there's lots of snow, the river will just be off limits completely and, flooding houses and stuff nearby and can get quite dangerous.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I know we just have similar things, but not so much strength of the water. It's just the height that we tend to look at. So that gives us an idea. But as you well know, the water can sometimes be big and clear, because one of the issues we have is coloration in the water as well. So that's quite an interesting way to look at it. The other thing you mentioned was native fish. Would I be right in thinking that's cutthroat trout that you're talking about?
Yeah, cutthroat trout are the native trout of the West. And they're a really interesting trout to go after. There's lots of varieties. The variety that we fish for here is the Bonneville cutthroat trout, because it's associated with Lake Bonneville, which is this huge pluvial lake that used to cover, I want to say 20,000 square miles, half of Utah, basically. It was just gigantic. These ancient lakes helped the cutthroat come in through the Columbia River drainage into the West. And then with the levels of the lake, it helped them get over mountain ranges. So the lake level would come up, the trout would migrate over these mountain ranges that were submerged. And then when the lakes receded, they were left in these various populations across the West. But there's 11 or 12 major varieties of cutthroats, and each state out here, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, has 3 or 2 or 4 of these species. And most of the wildlife agencies will offer a little incentive, like a badge or a certificate, if you can catch all of those varieties in a single season. And document it with photographic proof. And, so here in Utah, if you can catch Yellowstone, Bonneville, and I can't remember the other one. You catch 3 of them, you get a little certificate and a little recognition. And a lot of people are really, really into that. They want to catch every variety. They want to go to all the states, and then even catch. Oh, I want to catch the Bonnevilles from Logan and the Bonnevilles from the Weaver, or whatever. It's a nerd wonk sort of pursuit, or it can be.
Yeah, I think that sounds cool. I think I was lucky enough to catch a greenback in Colorado, but then I think that since then it's changed, hasn't it? And they were a little unsure whether they were native or not. Is that correct? I'm not 100% sure now.
Yeah, the greenback. What happened with cutthroat trout is that all of these varieties spread out, and they were once all, more or less thriving populations. And then development and non-native species introductions and, water scarcity really damaged the populations. So some of them were extirpated, some of them were just barely hanging on. And then conservation efforts come in and say, oh gosh, we got to save this population. And they try to coax it back into existence, but they find, oh, wait a second, it's been hybridized with rainbow trout or another kind of cutthroat trout. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of unsure science in place that says, what is this population, or is this population pure? And greenbacks are one that, they were just barely hanging on. They were probably years or so away from complete extinction, and they've fostered them back. But yeah, there's some unsurety about strain purity and stuff like that. But yeah, Colorado is a place where you can catch greenbacks. I think there's a tiny corner of Utah where there's a disputed population of greenbacks.
Yeah, it was a memorable day. I'd caught on the day brown brook cut. I had the greenback, and they said, you just need a rainbow trout. You just need the guys who'd taken us out for the day, and I couldn't catch one, which was funny. But sorry, Chadd.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the interesting thing about, and you said about the subspecies and spotting them, and obviously cutthroat are pretty straightforward. Cutbow, the hybridized with a rainbow trout, I can tell. What about those subspecies, though? Are they easy to delineate?
No, not really. There are some big distinctions. Fine spotted cutthroat obviously have very fine spots. It looks almost like pepper, whereas our Bonnevilles have a distinctive spot pattern that I can spot. Yellowstone cutthroat I think their spots are slightly denser and larger spots. Those are okay to spot, but most of the time, every stream kind of has its own morphology. A Logan River Bonneville cutthroat trout, to me, is very distinctive. And I've seen Bonneville trout elsewhere that don't look quite the same, but I know are Bonnevilles. And so sometimes it takes you need somebody along with you, kind of a cutthroat nerd to tell you, no, that's a Yellowstone. See here, here, and here. But you're sort of, you can't really go wrong because you're going to find that cutthroat in its native waters. So you don't have to sort out what's what. You just know, oh, that's a cutthroat. Cutthroats are easy to identify. You cannot miss them. It's just, which variety is this? And cutthroats have only been divided into these subspecies for, probably only 30 or 40 years. This guy, Robert Benke, a fish scientist, went through and very systematically broke them down and said, look, these are the differences and these are the varieties. And there's a fish researcher here at Utah State University who likes to break them down in terms of watersheds. So she would differentiate a Bonneville cutthroat trout from the Duchesne River drainage and the Logan River drainage. She says these are their own thing, even though they are interbreedable.
And where do you stand on whitefish? Because you mentioned those. Are you a fan of those?
Oh, I love whitefish. Yeah, whitefish are fun. They're a different, it's a different experience. They kind of they dig instead of leap and run. They kind of go down to the here anyway. They go down to the stream bed and just almost try to burrow into the gravel. But we can get whitefish up on the Logan in the winter, usually. Early winter, they start to spawn. And you can get whitefish up here that are 18 and 20 inches. You can catch 2 or 3 of those at a time. So, and they're just heavy and strong and a little weird looking, but no, I'd never turn my nose up at whitefish. In fact, for a while after I started catching whitefish with a little bit of regularity, I went out and tried to catch the biggest one I could, because at the time the state record came from the Logan River here very close. And I was just like, maybe I could catch a 21 3/4 inch fish and get the state record. But they're great.
Yeah.
I don't really have a snootiness toward any given fish species except carp. And I think that's because when I was a kid, I haven't always fly fished, but I've fished with other tackle since I can't remember really learning to fish. But I'd go with my grandpa, and he liked catfish and panfish like bass and bluegill. And if he ever caught a carp, and he would know immediately if he caught a carp. You didn't have to see it. Just down there in the water, you could tell by the way it was tugging. If you ever caught a carp, he would reach into his pocket and get out his cigarette lighter and just burn the line and just let the carp out. He didn't want him anywhere near the boat. He didn't want to touch him or anything. And he kind of, engendered me with this prejudice against carp. So I've never fished for carp, even though here in the West, that's becoming a big thing. Carp on the fly, you just there's a lake nearby here, Bear Lake, that has huge carp that guys go out and fish for with flies.
Yeah, it's become one of those real big, it's been there in the background. And like you say, once the US sort of gets into it, that sort of spreads the word. But it's always been in the background here. And Corsican Dave, who's written for Fly Culture a number of times, is a huge exponent and has been a guest on here as well. And he's hugely passionate about it. And it's lovely seeing it. We've sort of gone from chumming the fish up, throwing out, dog biscuits to get them rising, to actually stalking them as you would. And I know in the US, they sort of, even flats boats are employed, aren't they? In some of those big lakes, and fish, the boats are poled for the fish, which sounds really, really interesting. And I'm sort of getting my carp mojo back again, I have to say, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'll try it at some point. I have lots of friends who like it, and they say, yeah, you got to come out, and I'll do it eventually. But they're usually here. They're usually a non-native member of the fishery, and they do a lot of ecological damage. They root around on the bottom and they uproot aquatic vegetation, which makes it difficult for native fish to spawn, or for juvenile fish to have cover. And they're unwelcome in a lot of waters.
Let's have a look. You touched on your fishing, and I wanted to have a look at your fishing timeline. And again, it made me smile looking at an old article you'd written for Fly Culture, and you talked about in your front yard you were practicing your fly casting, and your neighbour came over and spoke to you as your tailing loop offended him from across the street. How did that sort of come about? And did a friendship evolve and continues as a result of that?
No, that guy, that anecdote, was from when I was trying to figure out fly casting and everything. And this guy who I knew already, he was my neighbor and I knew him, but I didn't know that he fly fished. And he came over and he was giving me some good advice. And then I thought, well, maybe, we can go fishing together. And he said, yeah, okay, yeah, we can go fishing together. And then later he came back and he said, hey, let's drive separately. And I said, that's fine. Where do you want to meet? And he's like, oh, we don't have to meet. You just go where you want to go and I'll go where I want to go. and it's because, and I feel this too myself, fishing with somebody who doesn't know how to fish, it can be kind of rewarding because you're sort of mentoring them and coaching them, but it can kind of be a pain too, because if you're switching off fishing, you have to wait endlessly for them to catch a fish and then for you to take the point. And I mentioned in that story that, even I wasn't really looking forward to fishing much with myself because I just didn't know what I was doing. But Yeah, that fishing with people versus not fishing with people, I've kind of gone back and forth. I used to just for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that I fished, I didn't really want to fish with anyone else because I didn't want to expose how bad I was, because I thought I was the worst angler in the world. When I started fishing with people, my preference sort of switched a little bit, but now I don't care. I'll go with somebody or with somebody, somebody who knows how to fish, somebody who doesn't, or I'll fish by myself, whatever works.
And that leads itself to your latest article really nicely, the audition, where you were invited to fish with some guys, and it turned out to be a really cool trip for you from that point of view. Tyler, I guess, who took the photographs for that as well, you fish with, and you're still all fishing together as a result of that trip, are you, and staying in touch?
Well, no, that was just this past summer, and that's the first time I'd fished with any of those guys, and we haven't been back out. When we went, I can't remember if it was May or July. The pandemic was just sort of starting. We thought, well, if we drive separately and stay 6 feet apart, we'd be okay. We're obviously staying in different tents. We'd be okay COVID wise, and it did. It turned out to be a really brilliant trip. With just some fantastic fish on a river that just doesn't get visited very much, and even here those experiences are getting rarer and rarer. It's a really great day if you can go fishing and not see another group or anybody else up there. And that was a great trip. But that was one. I've been fishing for a while. Those guys are fish scientists. So the experience level was sort of mitigated, and it's like these guys study these fish for a living. They know, how many scales are along the midline, and they can look at a microscope and tell the exact morphology of each fish, and so it was a little bit intimidating. And yeah, it did feel like an audition, getting up there and being perhaps the least experienced, the least knowledgeable of four fairly knowledgeable people, but as the story tells, it turned out to be something different, something better than that. Yeah,
and that must have felt pretty cool.
But I do, yeah, it was great, and I do plan to fish with those guys more. And Tyler is really excited about submitting another package to Fly Culture. That was the first publication that he'd had in print. And he's got some really great photos. He's got a good eye, and he tries to kind of do something different than the regular, heft and grin shots, and so he's excited about it.
That sounds cool. We're talking about friends there, and it's really important, isn't it, to pick the right fishing friends, isn't it? And I've done it before, and as a former guide, I've taken people out, and being the gentleman that I am, I said, well, you go first, and they go first, and I'm standing there an hour late because we're supposed to be sharing a rod on a tiny little stream, and it's an hour and a quarter later, and they said, oh, do you want to go? And I said, well, yes, I will. I think I'm probably going to have to start thinking about billing you for this, though. At some stage, because it's like a guided trip, and we didn't fish together as in that sense again, and that getting that balance right is really important, isn't it, from a competitive thing, from, like you say, somebody says, well, let's go fishing, but we're not going to see each other. It's finding that balance is really important, isn't it?
It's critically important that you pick the right people, because you are going to be with each other, perhaps on a long drive. You're going to be with each other on the river, and their behavior and their personality is going to affect your fishing. And so you really, it's almost like hiring somebody, for an important job at work. You have to like really carefully select those people that you're going to partner up with, and I feel like I've gone through a very long selection process, and I've narrowed down the people that I'll fish with to, probably 6 or 7, and 3 of those are, the main, the people that I will mainly go fishing with.
Yeah, I'm similar to that. And, my friend Ray, who I mentioned before, when he was living sort of a ways away, he'd phone me and say, how's the hatch? And I said, it's pretty good. He said, look, I'm getting on a train. Can you pick me up? And it was kind of like that. And then he's moved to Denmark, and I miss him dreadfully. We were just messaging actually before we came on here, and I was telling him that I was going to be speaking with you. And yes, I was really sad, but I found friends now that I fish and enjoy. And it's funny, you can pick up a conversation really easily, but don't you, when you catch a fish there or they catch a fish, you're equally as pleased for them as if it were yours. And I think that for me is the tester, isn't it? That knowing that you're okay with them doing well. And I think over time, those things average themselves out anyway, don't they? That somebody may have a good day and you may not have such a good day. And it sort of averages itself out, doesn't it?
Yeah. There are people, I've written about this guy, Brad Hansen, before for articles in Fly Culture and Eat Sleep Fish. He's just kind of an uncanny angler, and when I fish with him and other people fish with him, we just kind of expect that he's going to catch more fish. He's just a very focused and very businesslike angler. And there may have been a time very, very early on fishing with Brad that was an issue, like, man, I wish I could catch more than Brad. And sometimes you do, sometimes you get lucky and do. But and then now, I just don't care. I know he's going to catch, if I catch, a really nice fish, he's going to catch one that's a little bit longer, or maybe he's going to catch more. It just doesn't make any difference now. And same with my other friends. It's probably more that way. That you mentioned is, he outfishes me today, I outfish him tomorrow. That's fine.
Yeah, I think
and that's one thing you have to be really careful of. You got to be careful that you don't get one of these, really competitive people who get weird about it, who get like huffy if you're doing really well and they're not catching any, or they gloat on you, they kind of lord it over you. You cannot fish with people like that. And I kind of wonder what those people do, because I fish with people that I'll never fish with again because of those reasons, but they have to have people that they fish with. So how does that work? Do they just go fish and come back all angry and depressed? I don't know.
Yeah, it must be a strange thing. That's I fly fish because it's not competitive. That's the reason I love it so much, that it doesn't matter. And the fish usually beat my backside, and that's fine by me. I don't mind that in the slightest. But it is, I think for me, the tester is when, say you're sharing a rod, that they've caught a fish and the rod goes directly to you, or you fished what you feel is an appropriate amount of time and I'll often say, I've had a good go, I think it's your go now. And that's when I know I've got the right fishing buddy. And then I know that, that's the right person to fish with. I don't know if you subconsciously or consciously think about those things too.
Oh, well, I'm interested in what you said. You're sharing a rod. Is that like a regulation thing, or you can only have one rod?
No.
How does that work? Can you can't fish 2 rods at the same time, or what?
No, it's absolutely fine. It's just a cool way of fishing. You're almost, I guess, not guiding or semi-guiding, just sharing the experience together. So you just say, and it may be you're fishing, it generally more so for me anyway, happens on smaller streams. So not having public water, you may have a limited amount of club water or whatever it is. And so it's a kind of a cool way to fish a small stream. You're not going to spook the fish a little bit further up. It's not like you can walk a mile and a half away, not always anyway, that you can walk a long distance away. And it makes it that shared experience. So fishing together, it's just a nice way of doing it. It's a fun way of fishing, really.
Yeah. Well, and again, it sounds very British. There's manners involved, and there's sharing, and I guess we do that too. It's just that we don't share the rod. If we're on a small stream where 2 people can't be or more people can't be fishing at the same time, one person will go ahead and the others will stay back until the first person catches a fish, and then another person will go ahead and we'll just kind of switch off that way. But there is a sort of tradition, especially with a guy I fish with who's called Jason. Sometimes, you'll fish and not catch anything, or you'll catch something, and then if the person behind catches a fish behind the person who's in front, whoa, that's you because you've passed up a fish. And we call that pajamas. I got your pajamas. I found your pajamas back here in the water. You never want to leave a fish, because sometimes if the channel is pretty big, you're focusing on the left side or whatever, you go up, there may be a fish, a pocket or something that you kind of left behind, and the people coming up behind you have the rights to grab those. And it's a big embarrassment. It's a big source of taunting if you leave a fish behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that one too. So I haven't got that term, but I'm going to use that one. But my wish for this year is for my friend Perry. I so want him to catch a salmon from our home river, and we've tried really, really hard. And we had a instance year before last where he was delayed on the road, and I was waiting. The water was right. We were salmon fishing. The water was right. And I thought, I'll wait for him. This is it. He phoned me and said, I'm delayed. You go ahead. And of course I bloody caught one. And and I said, where are you, bud? And I phoned him and I said, I need you to net this fish. And I felt absolutely terrible about catching it. But my hope is this year it's going to happen. I demonstrated a pool we were fishing again. I said, look, this is a tricky one to fish. I just need to show you how to go. And I bloody hooked salmon then as well. And so I felt this year is the one. And I barely fish now when we salmon fish. I said, no, all I want is for you to catch a salmon. That's it. And I'll sit down, smoke a cigar, watch him, and we just talk about stuff. And I think, again, that comes round, doesn't it, to that friendship part of it. That's fine by me. It doesn't matter that I'm not holding the rod. I want my friends catch a fish, and with many of my others as well. It's a cool thing.
Yeah, if you go fishing with 2 people or 3 people, especially if they're in that vetted, approved friendship group, it's better that you all catch a kind of the same number of fish than if I were to catch, twice as many as them. I would rather us each catch, 20 fish than them catch 5 each and me catch 30.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. You saying, coming back to the British sort of thing, I assume you can imagine us, and it does happen sometimes, where I'm sharing a rod and we can spend 20 minutes saying, no, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
Yeah. If that was with my friends, they'd just be like, I'm going to go first. Stand aside.
Tell me something. You talked about the camping trips and things like that. It's not quite as easy to do that over here, that you got situations where you can camp on the river. Actually, near where I live, you can actually do it, but there's not many places where you can do it. That's an important part of it, I guess, as well, isn't it? And the post fish, sitting in the chairs, having a beer or something to eat, and looking back on the day. That must be a big part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah. That's, I think, would be my preferred mode of fishing, is to go to the place and stay there. There's, the way that I see it, in my fishing experience, there's 3 major categories of fishing, or there's 4 major categories of fishing. Okay. So just going on a trip in the Bear River watershed, my home waters, I go up there, I fish, maybe long enough to have lunch or to have a snack or something, and then I just come home. And like I said, in the watershed here, there's lots of different experiences, lots of different water to fish. You just kind of have to decide on what you want. Go up there alone, with friends, and then go home. The second mode of fishing would be more of an excursion, where you You drive to a campground, you unload your tent from your truck, you camp there. You've got your truck there. There's probably some primitive toilets and maybe some other amenities there. But you sit around a fire each night and you get out a cooler that has beer and sausages and that's really fun. But then there's, the third mode, which would probably be my preferred and favorite way to fish would be the backcountry fishing, which is where you drive a day into a trailhead and then you hike another day with a 40-pound or 50-pound pack up, into really, really high remote wilderness areas. We have these in the United States. We have designated wilderness areas where there are no roads, there are no permanent facilities, there are only foot trails. And, you go up into those areas with just what you can carry on your back. And you might not be drinking cold beer after every trip, but you maybe bring a flask of whiskey or something and just stay out there for as long as you can, 5 days or 6 days until you're just stinking, dirty and exhausted, and then sort of stagger back into town. The fourth mode of fishing would be you get on an airplane, you go to the UK, and then maybe like a former fishing guide, or it doesn't even have to be a former fishing guide, maybe just like a fly fishing magazine editor picks you up, or maybe even just a fly fishing podcaster. He picks you up at the airport, and then he just takes you to all the fabulous places to fish in the UK, for 4 or 5 days, and then you come home. That I don't have very much experience with that mode of fishing, but I think it's something that I'd really dig.
Nor do I.
But yeah, camping is it's just that, you go there, you set up your tent, and then it's just nothing but fly fishing. There's nothing else to really worry about. And you just eat when you get hungry and you sleep when you get tired. And the rest of it is just fishing. And, especially in the backcountry, because there's really nothing else you can do. You walk around, So yeah, you may fish, in the summer, you may fish 12 hours, with a few little breaks for, 5 days in a row. When I come back from backcountry fishing, I'll take a break of 4 weeks. I don't even need to fish anymore.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I make no secret of the fact that I'm a huge fan of your writing, and I really thoroughly enjoyed On Fly Fishing the Northern Rockies. How did that come about?
I had recently started fishing with this guy, Russ Beck, who appears in a lot of those stories. And it was, I was writing stuff I wasn't writing about fly fishing. I was writing short fiction and other, non-outdoor topics. And he was also writing nonfiction. He was writing about the LDS Church and some issues like that. And we started fishing together. He had a little bit of fly fishing experience, but he wanted to learn more. And we started fishing together, and it just became kind of inevitable that we would start writing about our fishing experiences. So we started a blog called How Small a Trout. And it seems like it was a long time, but I think it was just about like maybe a year that we said, we have to do a book. Let's do a book together. And we started kind of looking around for an idea to unify all of this writing that we had. And Russ Beck came up with this brilliant idea to write the new rules of fly fishing, which would be snarky and sarcastic. My wife just drifted past. We were going to write this. We were going to get 20 or 25 new rules of fly fishing, and they were going to be stuff like always tell the truth sometimes, or all the fish are underwater. Don't trust the guys at the fly shop, and then each one of those rules would have an essay to go along with it. And if you want to get a novel, a book of fiction published, you write the whole thing, you rewrite it, you have it edited, you polish it, you work on it, and then you go, when it's completely finished and perfect, then you go sell it. If you want to get a book of nonfiction published, you just have to have the idea. You don't have to write the whole thing. And so Russ and I had about half of this brilliant book written, and we took it to a publisher, and they said yes. And then we realized that we had, they gave us a deadline. We had only a few months to write the other half of this book that we'd been working on for a year and a half or whatever. And it sort of went a different way. And the rules are still in there. If you look at the table of contents, the rules are kind of hidden in there. But it was kind of a different thing than we'd set out to write. And it's so different from the original concept that we sometimes joke around that we could pitch the same idea to the same publisher and they would accept it again and we could write a different book. But yeah, it just became inevitable that we wrote about fly fishing, and we worked a lot. We still kind of trade writing and help each other out with editing and content and stuff like that.
And would I be right in thinking that there is another book coming?
Yes. Yeah. It'll be out in April. It's not a team up with Russ. I just wrote it myself, but it's just about this place where I live, the Bear River watershed, and all of the tributaries and all of its hidden pockets and history and ecology and natural history. Just lots of different topics, but focused on fly fishing.
How do you find that process of writing? It was the reason I asked this is that it was interesting. I'd had some upsetting news recently, and I went for a walk to the dog in the morning, as I always do, and I came back and I just wrote something really, really quickly, and it flowed very, very easily. Do you find that's where I'm getting with the process thing? Do you find that you can be in the mood or something can trigger a creative outpouring in a different way or a different direction that you hadn't expected previously?
Yeah. I really, a lot of writers, they have to put in a certain number of words or a certain time span of writing every day. They write at 10 o'clock and they get their cup of coffee and they write for an hour, or they write in the evening, or they write 1,000 words a day or something like that. And I've never been able to develop that habit. I just kind of it has to kind of hit me, either an idea or, as you say, a few lines of text kind of occur to you, and then start writing. This book really, it was a very steady process of writing. It took about a year and a half, and I was doing an essay or maybe half an essay per month, and it flowed very well. The book that I wrote before this, which is about the wind rivers and backpacking and backcountry angling, that was really more of a hit and miss. Like I would go months without writing anything on it, and then I would bang out a little bit and then, nothing. This one, I think, this Bear River book came a little more smoothly because I was fishing and I was, coming into contact with the people who were in the fish or who were in the book. And I was consulting a lot of experts about the history and the politics and water usage and jurisdictions and that kind of thing. I was talking to them a lot, doing research and reading a lot of books about, the history of this region. So I was always in possession of some material that needed to get down. And it was really satisfying to get to the end of that. But it seemed like I always had something I needed to write down. So I was writing a lot.
And how often do you write and rewrite? And you mentioned your wife, Amanda, there just in the background. Do you bounce ideas off of her? Does she have a look at text? How does that sort of relationship work?
Yeah. Well, I have a writing community. We belong to a writing group of 20 or so other writers that we meet with periodically to workshop each other's writing. And so that helps a lot. And then she and I are kind of our own writing group. I read everything that she writes and she reads everything that I write. And she writes kids' books, so I may not have, a lot to say about a particular story that she's writing. And she has fished, but she doesn't fish regularly. And so she might not have much to say about a new essay that I've got. But there is always some consultation and some helping, and we obviously proofread each other's material so that there's no typos or whatever in it. But we have a really collaborative relationship when it comes to writing. We don't always agree.
Yeah, I'm similar that Emma doesn't write, but she's the most magnificent grammar pedant there is. But also,
I've been
yeah,
edited by her.
yeah.
Yeah.
And mind you, with yourself, it's just American terms generally that she's switching to UK more than anything else. But it's similar that she'll give me honest feedback, and I put something out on Sunday, something that upset me, and I only put it on the Facebook. So she said that wasn't your best. But sometimes, and it's not a finished piece as such, it's just something I feel at that moment. And it's a nice way to get that out. But it is fascinating to be able to share that. And it's similar for me with the magazine. The first thing I look at, and writers like yourself, there's very little that needs looking at. But I just go by feel. And I think, would my readers like it? Would our readers enjoy that? And that's the most important thing for me. If it grabs me there, then you can change things, can't you? And you can help suggest things. And something today somebody sent me, which will probably appear in the summer edition, just needs some tweaking. And it's a fascinating process to be involved with. But it's the gut that hits me first with a piece that I feel, yes, that's got a place here. Is it similar for yourself?
Yeah. You have to have kind of a vibe. You kind of have to have an underlaying of sort of arc or some kind of a dynamic response, and then the rest is just words, as they say. But you do have to have some kind of twist or peak or something, a hook that grabs the reader, and then you kind of build around that. And that's usually, for me anyway, that's the hardest thing to come up with is, how does this flow? And if I can get that, then the rest is just putting down the words.
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes, all at once. Sometimes you get a story, like the story that I sent you for the winter edition. That story just, kind of fell out in the trip. That's just the way that it happened. Others, you're like, well, this trip nothing really happened here. How do I write about this? How do I tweak it so that it's interesting? And so, some trips just aren't. Some trips just don't have that spark.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know when I write something, Emma will say, that wasn't such a good day, was it? And it may have been a blog I was writing for whatever it was, or even when I was guiding perhaps as well. And even it's not on a conscious level, you're always aware of it. But, it's like you say, isn't it? If something really cool has happened on that trip or on that day, it flows a lot more easily than perhaps having to overthink it, isn't it?
Yeah. I do think, though, that, whether the trip was successful in terms of fish or unsuccessful, whether it was, you got unexpectedly rained on, there is always a place for the story, for you to kind of pull a story out of it. You don't necessarily have to catch a big fish or a lot of fish for it to make a good story. In fact, I think some of the best fly fishing stories are those that, something went wrong.
Yeah, no, I like that sort of stuff as well. And it's funny, I'm thinking about it while you were talking about it, and it may have even been in Eat Sleep Fish, I can't remember. And we fished, my friend Toby and I, an amazing piece of chalk stream. And it was one of those trips where we felt we were driving home again and it didn't feel it was right to finish the trip yet. So he said, look, there's this stream. I don't fish very often, and with him, you never know where you're going to end up. And we had to slide down stuff. I don't know how my waders survived it and all these sorts of things that went with it. And that was the trip. That was the story. And it was a tiny little unknown stream, not far from a petrol station that you probably wouldn't know that was there. Yet that just flew out of, I literally got home. I don't know if you're similar, that sometimes you can get home and just, and it comes out and flows like that. And it was funny. I really struggled with the main part of what I was thinking to write about. I couldn't do. And it was really interesting to see that.
Yeah. I sat down to write what I thought was a solid story, an interesting story, and then realizing, oh no, that the story that I was going to write is not the best representation of this trip or this fish or river this other thing is, and you just scrap what you had and start again. I've done that many times before. Yeah.
It's interesting the world we live in now, that bringing a new book to the marketplace, I guess, is different now, isn't it? In the way that you can reach people creatively and in other ways. Is that something that's in the back of your mind already, about whether it's social media, whether it's whatever, that's going to be part of that process to reach those readers?
Yeah, like I said, my wife writes kids' books, and she markets her own books, and she works on her, she kind of handles her own distribution and business and advertising. And my books are through this publisher, Arcadia Press, and the History Press. And this is the third book of fly fishing that I've written for them. And they kind of take care of more of the advertising and the distribution, and they put the book in stores and whatnot. And I don't really have a lot to do with it, but I have learned a lot of lessons writing books for them. And the first one, like I said, when Russ Beck and I wrote that first book, we just thought it was going to be so. We had a very romanticized view of what it was going to be like, and it started even before the book hit the shelves when we wanted to name the book. We thought naming the book is a very important thing. That's like naming your child. You give it a lot of thought, and there's a lot of meaning in it and everything. And the thing that we wanted to name the book was Always Tell the Truth Sometimes, the new rules of fly fishing. And we thought that was just going to be so clever, and nobody was going to be able, you would never be able to walk past that book on a shelf. You'd have to, it doesn't even matter if you're a fly fisherman, you're going to grab it. And they said, well, the title of the book's going to be On Fly Fishing the Northern Rockies, because that's what it's about. And we said, no, that's not what it's about. It's about so much more. And we went back and forth. I think four sets of emails back and forth. And I finally sat down, and for 2 hours, I poured out my soul into the keyboard and saying, listen, you can't just come in here and, chop off the naming of this book. That's such an important thing. And here are the reasons. And here are the, we're fly anglers. We know what fly anglers like, and here's what they want. And this is all of our evidence. And this must be named the way we want it to be named. And they wrote back and said, thanks for writing. The name of it's going to be On Fly Fishing the Northern Rockies. They just did not budge, never ever considered any change. And it's because the shelf, the shelf that you think of where your book is going to be doesn't really exist anymore. There are Barnes and Nobles out there. There are bookstores out there. But the real shelf is Amazon. And if somebody wants to know about fly fishing the Northern Rockies, they're going to type in fly fishing the Northern Rockies. They're not going to say fly fishing books with clever titles, and they're not going to run across your book accidentally. So we learned that lesson. And that is, I guess, the clever title is sort of it's a privilege that much more famous authors have, and authors who published, pre-Amazon have, but that's kind of gone away. And so the first book that we wrote was On Fly Fishing the Northern Rockies. The next book that I wrote about the Wind Rivers, we just decided to say On Fly Fishing the Wind Rivers. And then this book will be, this next book that's coming out in April will be On Fly Fishing the Bear River Watershed. And so now it's kind of a series, and we joke around, oh yeah, we're going to write 50 more of these. But so it's at least got a theme. But I don't think I'll ever get over the heartbreak of losing that title. We were going to name the book after a title of one of Russ Beck's essays. And it was just so clever, it just was a heartbreaker. But yeah, coming up against the digital age when you're writing kind of rustic, you're trying to write these timeless rustic pieces, and then it gets kind of categorized into some sterile nook among the 18 billion books that are on Amazon. It was kind of an education.
But hopefully that will work out, and I'm looking forward to reading this one when it comes out too. You must be I suppose it's sort of kind of like being a musician in releasing an album in some respects, isn't it? There's that excitement when it comes out, and then nervousness of how it's taken and everything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement at the beginning. I've just got page proofs. They send you what the book's going to look like, and you have one last chance to change anything. I just got those page proofs. I got a cover. They showed me the cover design. And so, yeah, this anticipation is building. You get a lot of excitement, and then the book comes out, and nothing really happens. And so you just kind of say, oh, okay, that's another book. The world doesn't stop and turn and say, oh, Chadd's got a book, But it is exciting, and I'm hoping that COVID will settle down a little bit this spring and summer, so that we can do some readings as we've done, some appearances as we've done before, and maybe have some excitement that way. But it is. There is a lot of excitement at the beginning, and then you have to make your own excitement by writing another one.
Cool. We've been going well over an hour now, actually, and I was thinking about what is it from a fishing perspective this year, given that we get back to some form of normality, I guess. Is there anything are you just going to keep enjoying where you are, or have you got road trips? You said you had a couple cancelled, so have you got road trips that you're hoping to put together at some stage?
Yeah, there's there's one of the native cutthroat trout strains in the United States is the golden trout. The golden trout is a native of California, but it was transported maybe 100 years or so ago to many drainages throughout the West, and there is a lake apparently in the Wind River Range in Wyoming that doesn't have a name on any map. It's one of the unnamed. There's probably hundreds of unnamed lakes in the Wind Rivers, but people who have found the lake call it Flying Monkey, and it's supposedly, golden trout. They only get to be about 10 or 12 inches long typically, but there's a lake in the Wind Rivers that apparently grows 18 and 20-inch golden trout. And nobody will tell you about it. Nobody will show you where it is on a map, and it's not labeled on any of our topographic maps. You have to kind of find it yourself, and once you find it, the people who know about it will confirm that for you, and then you'll become part of the Flying Monkey Club. And yes, a couple of friends and I want to go find that. Apparently, you have to cross a glacier to get to it, so we may not be coming back. But yeah, we're after all this COVID and stuff, we're excited to make an attempt on Flying Monkey.
Brilliant. I was just suddenly, while you were talking about that, I realised that perhaps I am becoming a species geek, that those Goldens have been on my bucket list. The Bonnevilles have as well, but those Goldens, those little ones in California as well, have been one that's been on the bucket list as well. So that'll be fascinating to see how you get on with that as well. So, and I'm...
Yeah, if you ever... If you ever have a span of time where you can come over here to the States and we can line it up with a backpacking trip, there's just nothing like it, being in that setting, and the fishing is just sort of, it's almost kind of embarrassing the way the fishing is, because it's big fish and it's frequent fish, and it's just almost like you can't help catch these large fish all through that area. And the people that I've introduced to it have, they can never go back to just regular river, plunking around for 12-inch browns. And we got kind of this loyal core of people who go there every year. And if the timing ever works out, you really ought to come.
That would be absolutely amazing. I'm trying. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but we're trying, Ray and I, to get out to Montana. And again, I know we've talked about trying to hook up in the past, and I hope we can do that at some stage as well. And of course, if I do get to meet any editors or podcasters or whatever, you'd always be welcome over in the UK to come and see our little streams, and we can spend a happy 20 minutes deciding who wants to go first on the pool as well. Chadd, it's been fantastic catching up. I feel like I've known you so long, and it's been so nice to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time with speaking with me today. Thank you for being a part of Fly Culture. I think Fly Culture is a better place for you being in it as well. So thank you for that. And thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for telling me a lot about you as an angler, about friendship, because that's really important, isn't it? And your home system. If people want to get hold of you regarding the book or anything else, is there any way people can get hold of you?
Facebook on fly fishing. I just have a page there that I just post, funny stuff about fly fishing or interesting news articles about fly fishing. But then I also publicize the books there, and it'll have lots of information on the release and how to get it. It's interesting. The books that I have written do have. They do sell in the UK, and I think it's because of Eat, Sleep, Fish and Fly Culture. I kind of check the stats, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's always a few over there across the pond.
Cool.
So yeah, it's just on fly fishing.
Cool. Well, that's fantastic. It's lovely to help in some small way. So, Chadd, I'd love to thank you for being such a great and interesting and funny guest as well. It's been, like I say, fantastic to catch up with you, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
I've been looking forward to it for a long time. It's been fun.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. As ever, there will be lots more in the pipeline. If you are listening to this or watching it on YouTube, perhaps you would consider giving a review or subscribing to the page. I greatly appreciate it. And as ever, there'll be plenty more in the pipeline. So thank you for listening to the Fly Culture podcast.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.